Well, U.S. lawmakers are asking for another $600 billion to fight the drug addiction crisis. And the state of New Hampshire is one of the most affected regions in the nation. CCTV Sean Callebs went there to take a closer look at the impact of illegal drugs and how the government is trying to reverse the devastation.
It's hard to overstate the seriousness of the heroin epidemic in the United States.
You know, I don't know a single person who hasn't been affected in some way by substance use disorder. And that's what happened to me.
After spending 27 years addicted to drugs and alcohol, Dennis Dutra is a recovery coach, helping people get clean the way he did. But out on the cold streets, trouble is waiting, right outside his Manchester, New Hampshire clinic.
I've noticed syringes here and there on the ground. I see cars pulling up beside each other and making a deal.
Does it make you mad?
It makes me grateful. It makes me grateful that I'm not stuck there anymore.
The U.S. problem with opiates is especially bad in New Hampshire. This overwhelmingly white, affluent, small northeastern state has the second highest overdose rate in the United States.
The overprescription of opioids, we're guilty of that in the state. People abusing prescription opioids, and then when they're not able to get a prescription anymore and the price is pretty expensive on the street, heroin became much cheaper and more readily accessible.
The head of the recovery center, Serenity Place, calls it a public health crisis. Substance abuse costs this small state $1.84 billion a year in lost worker productivity, $81 billion across the entire U.S. Linda Saunders-Paquette runs New Futures, a New Hampshire operation to help combat the substance abuse problem, detailing to state lawmakers the suffering on all levels, human and financial.
The sad thing is we have shared data about the impact on our economy. We have shared data about the effectiveness of substance use treatment, and many of our policymakers choose to disregard that.
The number of people who die is astounding.
We lose 129 people every single day in this country to opioid overdose. That's the equivalent of two jumbo jets crashing every day.
Those working in treatment say they have recently noticed a shift in attitudes. They're hoping funding and a greater commitment to battling the crisis will soon follow.
It will need to be a long-term solution because we are not going to address this problem overnight.
Well, Sean is joining us now. Now, Sean, when it comes to opening that door to heroin abuse, a lot of people are pointing the finger at the doctors when it comes to overprescribing. What's happening there?
Well, I think that's exactly what people are saying. And it's so easy to get hooked on opiates. That's a big problem. You may hurt your back, get OxyContin. Somebody gets, your son, daughter gets in the medicine cabinet, gets them, and in a matter of days, you're hooked on opiates. And that's the problem. So now there's a big effort to pare back that and also change the way they manufacture some of these narcotics. But why New Hampshire, that small state? Well, one reason is they spend so little money on treatment, recovery. So once somebody's hooked on that, it's really easy to stay on and on and on, and that's the reason the cartels target that area. We have a map that shows you how much this has changed, and it's really telling because in 2003, you see on the right side there, not many people. Relatively speaking, it wasn't a huge problem. Look at it today. The Southwest, why is that a big problem? It's right across from Mexico. A lot of it comes right across the border. Appalachia, it is a poor income area, and OxyContin has actually been called hillbilly heroin, which is that area. And then the Northeast, we talked about that as well. And one thing we're actually hearing from police and first responders, they come across so many people overdosing, they carry in their vehicles something called Narcan, and when they come across someone overdosing, they just jab the syringe. It's an antidote, if you will, for someone overdosing, and it can mean the difference between life and death. But the fact that police and first responders carry those, it just goes to show you what a problem it is.
And you mentioned that door opening for the cartels. So where does it go after that? Once they are able to kind of get in there because they're not getting that money for recovery.
That's, you know, it's a big problem what they're going to do in terms of treating this. In terms of the bringing drugs over, Afghanistan by far and away is the leader in the world of manufacturing heroin. And since that country's had its well-chronicled problems and seems always on the verge of some kind of collapse, and the Taliban gets that money by growing, selling heroin, so it floods into these areas, comes into Mexico, and it just comes across the border. So there's a ready supply, and if someone gets hooked on OxyContin, the opioids, then they can go out in the street once that prescription's gone. And those pills individually can cost between $50 and $80 a piece. Well, they can't spend that kind of money for a long time, so they turn to heroin, and the heroin can be as little as $5 a bag, and it's cut with something called fentanyl, which is a synthetic heroin, which is 60 times more powerful than heroin and can just shut down the involuntary muscles, stop people from breathing, lead to overdose death. It is a full-on crisis in the United States.
It definitely seems there's a lot of stops on the supply chain where they could really get that help needed.
Exactly.
Thank you again for joining us, Sean Callebs.